Subscribe now to receive daily miracles of Our Lady in your life. August 12, 2016, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The water rose so fast that families didn't have time to grab anything but their children. Emma Thibodeau was 11 years old when she learned that sometimes God's mercy arrives in the darkest waters. Her grandfather Leonard had raised her alone since she was 6, when her parents died in a car accident on Interstate 10. Leonard was everything to Emma: father, mother, teacher, protector, and best friend. He was a retired construction worker with calloused hands that knew how to fix anything broken, except his own failing body. Leonard was diabetic. Type 1, insulin dependent, the kind that doesn't forgive missed doses. When the storm came, they were at home on Bluebonnet Boulevard, a modest house with a front porch where Leonard liked to sit in the evenings, watching Emma practice her violin. The weather forecast had mentioned rain, but nothing prepared them for what was about to happen. The Amite River, swollen beyond recognition, broke through its banks with biblical fury. In 6 hours, what meteorologists would later call a 1,000-year flood dumped 3 times more water than Hurricane Katrina. Neighborhoods that had never seen a puddle were suddenly underwater. 31 inches of rain, 13 people dead, 40,000 homes damaged or destroyed. Leonard grabbed Emma's hand at 4 a.m. when the water reached their front door. By 4:15, it was at their knees. By 4:30, it was at their waists. "Grandpa, I'm scared," Emma whispered, clutching his shirt. "I know, baby girl. We're going to be okay. We're going to the church. Our Lady will protect us." The Church of Our Lady of Lourdes was only 4 blocks away, built on slightly higher ground. Leonard had been going there every Sunday for 40 years. He'd been baptized there, married there, buried his wife there, and years later, buried his only son, Emma's father. They waded through chest-deep water in the dark, Leonard pulling Emma along, both of them soaked and shivering despite the summer heat. Other families were doing the same, converging on the church like refugees seeking sanctuary. Father Michael Como, the parish priest, was already there, helping people climb to the roof through an attic access. 23 people made it up before the water covered the first floor completely, but Leonard had forgotten something critical in the chaos of fleeing: his insulin. The vials were still in the refrigerator at home, now floating somewhere in the wreckage of their kitchen. For the first 12 hours, Leonard seemed fine. Tired, yes, worried certainly, but functional. He held Emma close on the roof as they watched the water continue to rise, covering cars, mailboxes, stop signs. The whole world seemed to be drowning. Father Como led them in prayer, the rosary, again and again. "Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee." The words floated up into the gray sky like desperate messages in bottles, sent to a heaven that seemed very far away. By the second day, Leonard's hands started to shake. Emma noticed first. "Grandpa, are you okay?" "Just tired, sweetheart. Just tired." But it wasn't just fatigue. His blood sugar was climbing into dangerous territory. Without insulin, his body was slowly poisoning itself. Ketoacidosis, a condition that would soon make his blood acidic, shutting down organs one by one. By the 3rd day, Leonard could barely stand. Emma held his head in her lap, stroking his gray hair, singing to him the lullabies he used to sing to her. Other families on the roof tried to share what little food and water they had, but Leonard couldn't keep anything down. His breathing became labored, shallow. Father Como knelt beside them, praying quietly, anointing Leonard's forehead with water from the flood, the only water available. "Lord, have mercy on your servant Leonard. Blessed Mother, intercede for this faithful man and his precious granddaughter." Emma didn't cry. She couldn't. She felt frozen, watching the only person she had left in the world slip away from her, and there was nothing, absolutely nothing she could do. Rescue boats had tried to reach them, but the current was too strong, the debris too dangerous. Helicopters couldn't land on the sloped roof. The Coast Guard promised they'd come back when conditions improved. But when would that be? Tomorrow. The next day. Leonard didn't have tomorrow. On the evening of the third day, as the sun set blood red over the flooded city, Leonard Thibodeau slipped into a diabetic coma. His eyes rolled back. His body went limp. His breathing became a terrible rattling sound that Emma would hear in her nightmares for years. "Grandpa, Grandpa, wake up. Please wake up." Emma shook him, but he didn't respond. Father Comeau checked his pulse. Still there, but faint and irregular. "We need to pray," he said quietly to the others. Everyone knew what that meant. Leonard was dying. Emma sat there holding his hand, staring at his face. She thought about how he'd taught her to ride a bike, holding the seat until she found her balance. How he'd sat in the front row at every school concert, even when her violin playing was scratchy and off-key. How he'd made her breakfast every morning, scrambled eggs with cheese, just the way she liked them. How he'd told her stories about her parents, keeping their memory alive, making sure she knew she came from love. And now she was losing him too. The others on the roof gave her space, their faces etched with pity and helplessness. There was nothing anyone could do but wait. But Emma Thibodeau, 11 years old and alone in the world, decided she would not wait. She stood up. "Where are you going?" Father Comeau asked, alarmed. Emma looked at the access hatch that led down into the church. The water inside would be deep, at least 8 feet, maybe more. The entire first floor was submerged. "I need to talk to her," Emma said simply. "To who?" "To the Blessed Mother. She's down there, in the church. I need to ask her to help my grandpa." Father Comeau's face went pale. "Emma, no. The water is too deep. You could drown. My grandpa is dying," Emma interrupted, her voice steady and clear. "I'm not going to just sit here and watch him die. Our Lady is down there, and I'm going to ask her for help." Before anyone could stop her, Emma descended through the hatch. The water was shockingly cold and black as ink. She couldn't see anything. She took a deep breath and dove under, pulling herself along the walls, following the path she'd walked hundreds of times to the altar. Her lungs burned. Her legs kicked frantically. The darkness was absolute. And then she saw it. A light. A soft blue light, glowing from somewhere ahead. Emma swam toward it, her chest screaming for air, her vision starting to blur. The light was coming from the altar, from the statue of Our Lady of Lourdes. Emma broke the surface, gasping, and grabbed onto the pedestal. She pulled herself up and wrapped her arms around the statue's base, pressing her face against the cold plaster, sobbing. "Please," she whispered. "Please help him. He's all I have. Please don't let him die. Please." And then she felt it, a hand on her shoulder, warm, real, solid. Emma opened her eyes. A woman was standing beside her in the water, wearing a blue veil. Her face was beautiful beyond description, ageless, and full of infinite tenderness. "Emma," the woman said softly, and her voice was like music, like coming home after a long journey. Emma didn't ask who she was. She knew. "My child," Our Lady said, "your grandfather will live to see you grow up. He will walk you down the aisle on your wedding day. He will hold your first child in his arms. This I promise you." She reached into the folds of her robe and pulled out a small glass vial filled with clear liquid. "Take this to him," she said, placing it in Emma's hand. "And never forget, I am always with you, especially in the deepest waters." Emma looked down at the vial. When she looked up again, the woman was gone, but the light remained, growing brighter and brighter, until the entire church seemed to glow from within. On the roof, Father Comeau and the others suddenly saw light streaming up through the hatch, brilliant blue light, impossible and beautiful. They heard a voice, a child's voice, Emma's voice, but she seemed to be talking to someone. "Thank you," they heard her say. "Thank you so much." And then she emerged from the hatch, climbing back onto the roof. She was completely dry. Her clothes, her hair, her skin, bone dry, as if she'd never been in the water at all. In her hand was a vial of insulin, still cold from refrigeration, labeled with Leonard Thibodeau's name and prescription number. Father Como stared at it in disbelief. How did you? Emma didn't answer. She ran to her grandfather and with trembling hands administered the injection just as she'd seen him do 1,000 times. 20 minutes later, Leonard's eyes fluttered open. Emma? He whispered, confused, weak, but alive. I'm here, Grandpa, I'm here. He looked at her, then at the empty vial beside him, then back at her. What happened? She helped us, Emma said simply. She said you're going to see me grow up. The rescue helicopters arrived the next morning, finally able to navigate safely. As they airlifted Leonard to the hospital, Emma looked back at the church one last time. Other survivors who'd been sheltering nearby reported something impossible. When the waters finally receded days later, they found the Church of Our Lady of Lourdes devastated like everything else. Pews destroyed, walls stained, carpet ruined. Except for one thing. The statue of Our Lady of Lourdes stood on its pedestal in perfectly dry marble, without a single drop of water damage. Around the base of the statue, rescue workers found hundreds of white roses, fresh and fragrant, floating in the receding water. There were no rose bushes anywhere near the church. Every plant in the neighborhood had been killed by the flood. Where did the roses come from? Emma knew, but she didn't need to tell anyone. Some miracles speak for themselves. The ambulance carrying Leonard Thibodeau arrived at Our Lady of the Lake Regional Medical Center at 9:47 a.m. on August 15th, the feast of the Assumption of Mary. Dr. Patricia Rousseau was the attending physician in the emergency room that morning, exhausted from 3 days of treating flood victims. She'd seen everything: near drownings, infections from contaminated water, injuries from debris, diabetic emergencies, heart attacks brought on by stress and exertion. But she'd never seen anything like Leonard Thibodeau. "Get me his chart," she ordered the nurse, checking Leonard's vital signs. His blood pressure was stable, heart rate normal, blood oxygen good. For a man who'd been in a diabetic coma without insulin for 3 days, he looked remarkably fine. Too fine. "Doctor, there's something strange here," the nurse said, studying the paramedics' report. "They found him unconscious on a rooftop. No insulin for 72 hours. But his glucose levels are almost normal now. And there's a note here that says..." She hesitated. "That says his 11-year-old granddaughter administered an injection she got from inside a flooded church." "Doctor," Rousseau looked up sharply. "What?" Emma sat in the corner of the examination room, still wearing her damp clothes from the flood, her dark hair tangled, her eyes watchful and calm. She held the empty insulin vial in her hands like a precious relic. "Sweetheart," Dr. Rousseau said gently, kneeling beside Emma, "can you tell me where you got that medicine?" Emma met her eyes directly. "The Blessed Mother gave it to me." I'm sorry, the who?" "The Blessed Mother, Our Lady. She was in the church, in the water. She gave me the insulin and told me my grandpa would live to see me grow up." Dr. Rousseau glanced at the nurse, who looked equally bewildered. The doctor had seen trauma do strange things to children's minds. Hallucinations from stress, dissociation, the brain's way of coping with unbearable fear. "Emma, I need to examine this vial. May I see it?" Emma handed it over reluctantly. Dr. Rousseau studied it carefully. It was a standard 10 ml vial of Humalog insulin, labeled with Leonard's name, prescription number, and the pharmacy information. Walgreens on Government Street. The expiration date was still 6 months away. But here's what made no sense. The vial was cold, refrigerator cold. Insulin needed to be kept between 36 and 46 degrees Fahrenheit. In the August heat of Louisiana, even in floodwater, insulin would have warmed up within an hour. And according to the paramedics' report, this vial had been found on a rooftop in 90-degree weather, yet it was still properly chilled. "We need to run a full tox screen and metabolic panel on Mr. Thibodeau," Dr. Rousseau said quietly to the nurse. "And I want to speak with the paramedics who brought him in. Something isn't adding up here." While Leonard was moved to a room for observation, Dr. Rousseau made a phone call to the Walgreens pharmacy on Government Street. It took 20 minutes to get through. The phone lines were overwhelmed with flood-related calls, but finally a pharmacist answered. "Yes, I'm calling about a prescription for Leonard Thibodeau, insulin. Can you tell me when he last picked up his medication?" There was typing on the other end. "We have him in our system. Last pickup was August 10th, a 30-day supply. But doctor, our pharmacy has been closed since the 12th. We were completely flooded, we had to evacuate. Everything in our refrigerators was destroyed. We lost thousands of dollars in medication. The building won't reopen for weeks. So there's no way a vial from your pharmacy could have been dispensed on August 13th, 14th, or 15th. No way. Our doors have been locked, and the pharmacy is under 4 feet of water. Nobody's been inside." Dr. Rousseau hung up slowly. She walked back to Leonard's room and found him sitting up in bed, looking tired but alert, holding Emma's hand. Father Comeau had also arrived, along with several other survivors from the church rooftop. "Mr. Thibodeau," Dr. Rousseau said carefully, "I need to ask you some questions. Do you remember what happened?" Leonard nodded slowly. "I remember feeling sick. Very sick. I remember thinking this was it, that I was going to die and leave Emma alone." His voice cracked. "And then I don't remember anything until I woke up and saw her face." "Do you remember your granddaughter giving you an injection?" "No, I was unconscious." "Doctor," Rousseau turned to Father Comeau. "Father, you were there. Tell me exactly what you saw." Father Comeau was a man of 65, with silver hair and weathered hands that had administered countless sacraments. He'd been a priest for 40 years. He'd seen people die. He'd seen people survive against odds. He'd witnessed faith and doubt, miracles and tragedies, but he'd never seen anything like what happened on that roof. "Doctor," he began slowly, "I need you to understand something. I'm not a superstitious man. I believe in God, yes, but I also believe in science, in medicine, in rational explanations. What I'm about to tell you, I can barely believe it myself." He described Emma's decision to go down into the flooded church, how he'd tried to stop her but she'd descended anyway, how they'd waited in terrible silence expecting her to drown, expecting to lose both grandfather and granddaughter in one horrible night. "And then we saw the light," Father Comeau said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Blue light, doctor, coming up through the hatch from inside the church, bright as daylight. And we heard Emma's voice, talking to someone. Maybe she was talking to herself," Dr. Rousseau suggested gently. "Children under stress sometimes." "She was having a conversation," interrupted Mrs. Delacroix, one of the other survivors, a woman in her 70s who'd lost her home in the flood. "We all heard it. She'd say something, then pause, then respond like someone was answering her, and her voice sounded, different, peaceful, like she wasn't afraid anymore. And when she came back up," Father Comeau continued, "she was completely dry. Doctor, she'd been underwater. We all saw her go down into that flooded church, but when she came back up, her clothes, her hair, everything was bone dry, and she had that vial in her hand." Dr. Rousseau felt a chill despite the warm hospital room. That's not possible." "I know," Father Comeau said, "but 12 people saw it, 12 witnesses." Over the next 3 days, as the floodwaters slowly receded and Baton Rouge began the long process of recovery, Dr. Rousseau couldn't let go of Leonard's case. She ran every test she could think of. His kidney function was perfect, impossible for someone who'd gone through severe diabetic ketoacidosis. His blood chemistry showed no signs of the metabolic crisis he should have experienced. It was as if his body had been protected somehow, preserved through the worst of it. She sent the insulin vial to the lab for analysis. It came back as perfectly normal Humalog insulin, properly stored, no contamination, no degradation. She reviewed the paramedics' report again and again. They'd documented Leonard's condition when they'd found him: comatose, unresponsive, pulse thready, and weak. By all medical standards, he should have died or at least suffered permanent organ damage. Instead, he was eating solid food, walking the hospital corridors, and planning where he and Emma would live while their house was being repaired. On the fourth day, Dr. Rousseau decided to visit the Church of Our Lady of Lourdes herself. The neighborhood was devastated. Homes sat empty, their contents piled in soggy heaps on the curbs. The smell of mold and sewage hung heavy in the humid air. Cars were abandoned in strange positions, deposited by the floodwaters like toys scattered by a careless child. The church had been hit hard. The front doors hung open, revealing a sanctuary filled with mud and debris. Pews were overturned. Hymnals and prayer books lay ruined on the floor. The stations of the cross on the walls were water-stained and warped. But as Dr. Rousseau walked down the aisle, her boots squelching in the mud, she saw something that stopped her in her tracks. The statue of Our Lady of Lourdes stood on its pedestal near the altar, completely untouched. The marble base was clean, dry, not a single stain. The statue itself, Mary in her blue and white robes, hands folded in prayer, looked as if it had been freshly cleaned and polished. Everything around it was destroyed. The altar cloth was ruined. The candles had melted into grotesque shapes. The crucifix on the wall above was water-damaged and discolored. But the statue was perfect. Dr. Rousseau stepped closer, her scientific mind trying to find an explanation. Maybe the pedestal was higher than she thought. Maybe the water hadn't actually reached it. Maybe someone had come in after the flood and cleaned it. But no, the mud line on the walls showed clearly that the water had risen to at least 7 feet. The statue stood at 6 feet. The water had definitely covered it. And then she saw the roses. Dried now, brown and brittle, but still there. Hundreds of rose petals scattered around the base of the statue. She picked one up. It crumbled in her fingers, but she could still detect a faint, sweet fragrance. Beautiful, isn't it? Dr. Rousseau turned to find Father Como standing in the doorway of the church. Father, I came to see for myself. I understand. I've been coming here every day, just staring at it, trying to understand. He walked up the aisle to join her. The archdiocese sent investigators, structural engineers to check if the pedestal was somehow waterproofed, botanists to identify the roses. Everyone's looking for a rational explanation. And there isn't one. The pedestal is ordinary marble, no different from the other stone in the church. The roses are Rosa alba, white roses, but there are no rose bushes anywhere in the neighborhood. Every garden was destroyed, every plant killed. These roses shouldn't exist. They stood together in silence, looking at the statue. Doctor, Father Como said finally, I know you're a woman of science. I know you're trained to look for medical explanations, but sometimes... He paused. Sometimes we encounter something that science can't explain, something that requires a different kind of understanding. Dr. Rousseau wanted to argue. She wanted to insist that there had to be a logical explanation, that miracles were just events we didn't understand yet, that with enough investigation and testing, everything could be explained. But standing there in that ruined church, looking at the untouched statue and the impossible roses, she found that her certainty was wavering. That evening, she returned to the hospital and found Emma sitting beside her grandfather's bed, reading to him from a children's book. Emma, Dr. Rousseau said softly, can you tell me again what happened? What you saw in the church? Emma looked up with those calm, knowing eyes. I told you, the Blessed Mother was there. She gave me the medicine and said my grandpa would live to see me grow up. But what did she look like? What exactly did she say? Emma smiled, a small, peaceful smile. She looked like love, Doctor. Like all the love in the world in one person. And she told me that she's always with us, especially in the deepest waters. Especially in the deepest waters. Dr. Rousseau felt tears prick her eyes unexpectedly. She also told me something else. Emma added quietly. She said you've been asking God for a sign. She said this is it. Dr. Rousseau's breath caught. She hadn't told anyone, not her husband, not her colleagues, not even her priest, about the crisis of faith she'd been experiencing. how she'd been praying for months, asking God to show her something, anything, to help her believe again after years of seeing so much suffering in the emergency room. She'd prayed for a sign, and here it was, delivered by an 11-year-old girl with dark hair and steady eyes. "How did you?" Dr. Rousseau whispered. "I didn't know," Emma said simply. "But she did. She knows everything. She said to tell you that your prayers were heard, all of them." That night, Dr. Patricia Rousseau sat in her car in the hospital parking lot and cried for the first time in years. Meanwhile, news of the miracle at Our Lady of Lourdes was beginning to spread through Baton Rouge. In a city devastated by disaster, desperate for hope, the story of the girl who spoke with the Virgin Mary in the flooded church became a beacon of light. People began visiting the church, kneeling in the mud, praying before the untouched statue. Volunteers arrived to help clean up, but they left the area around the statue exactly as they'd found it, roses and all. The local news picked up the story, then the state news, then inevitably, the national news. And with the news came the skeptics. Dr. Marcus Webb arrived in Baton Rouge on August 22nd with a film crew, 3 assistants, and an agenda. He was a professor of psychology at Tulane University in New Orleans, specializing in religious experiences and mass hysteria. His books, The God Delusion in Modern America and Miracles, a Scientific Debunking, had made him a celebrity in skeptical circles. He'd investigated dozens of alleged miracles, weeping statues that turned out to be condensation, faith healings that were misdiagnosed conditions, apparitions that were optical illusions or deliberate hoaxes. He'd never found a single case he couldn't explain. The story of Emma Thibodeau and the flooded church was, in his view, a textbook example of trauma-induced hallucination combined with community wishful thinking. A city devastated by disaster, desperate for hope, had latched onto a child's fantasy and turned it into a miracle narrative. He was going to expose it. The girl experienced extreme stress, Dr. Webb explained to the camera crew outside Our Lady of the Lake Hospital. Her grandfather was dying. She was terrified. The human mind under such conditions can create incredibly vivid hallucinations as a coping mechanism. She convinced herself she saw the Virgin Mary because that's what her religious upbringing had prepared her to see in a moment of crisis. "But what about the insulin?" asked Jennifer Marchand, the reporter from WBRZ News. "Where did it come from?" Dr. Webb smiled patiently. "That's what we're here to find out. I guarantee you there's a rational explanation. Perhaps someone on that roof had insulin and the girl took it in her confused state, then created a false memory about where it came from. Or perhaps emergency supplies were dropped and she found them. Memory is extremely unreliable, especially in children under stress." "And the statue? The witnesses say it was completely dry even though the church was underwater." "Witnesses also say they saw the light," Dr. Webb countered. "Group psychology is a powerful thing. When people want to believe something badly enough, they'll interpret ambiguous evidence in ways that support that belief. It's called confirmation bias." But Dr. Webb's confidence began to erode the moment he met Emma Thibodeau. He'd expected a traumatized child, easy to lead, suggestible, perhaps eager to please adults by maintaining a story she'd been praised for. Instead, he found a composed 11-year-old who answered his questions with calm precision and showed no signs of the psychological fragility he'd anticipated. They met in a conference room at the hospital with Leonard, Father Comeau, and Dr. Rousseau present. "Emma," Dr. Webb began in his most gentle, therapeutic voice, "I want to help people understand what really happened to you. Sometimes when we're very scared, our minds can play tricks on us. We might think we see things that aren't really there. Do you understand?" Emma nodded. "Yes, sir." "So, when you went down into that flooded church, you were very scared, weren't you?" "Yes, sir, I was scared my grandpa was going to die." "Exactly. And sometimes when we're that scared, we might imagine things. We might see things that feel very real but are actually just in our mind." Emma tilted her head slightly. "Are you saying I imagined the Blessed Mother?" "I'm saying it's possible. Your brain was trying to help you feel better, so it created an image of someone comforting, someone your Catholic upbringing had taught you about. But she gave me the insulin," Emma said simply. How did my brain imagine that? Dr. Webb leaned forward. That's what I'm trying to understand. Can you tell me exactly what happened? Step by step? Emma took a breath and recounted the story she'd told everyone. Diving into the flooded church, seeing the blue light, swimming to the statue, seeing the woman in blue, receiving the insulin vial, hearing the promise about her grandfather. Dr. Webb listened carefully, looking for inconsistencies, for signs of a rehearsed narrative or embellishment. But Emma's account was remarkably consistent, delivered without dramatic flourishes or emotional manipulation. This woman, Dr. Webb said, how tall was she? Emma thought for a moment. Taller than me, maybe as tall as you. And what was she wearing exactly? A blue veil, a white dress, and there was light around her, not like a flashlight, like she was made of light. Did anyone else see her? No, sir, just me. Doesn't that seem strange to you? If she was really there, why didn't anyone else see her? Emma looked at him with those steady, knowing eyes. She came for me, because I asked her to, because I needed her. Dr. Webb switched tactics. Let's talk about the insulin. You said she handed it to you. Was it in a bag? A box? No, sir, just the vial. And it had your grandfather's name on it? Yes, sir. Emma, is it possible that someone on that roof had insulin? Maybe another diabetic? And in your confused state, you took it and later convinced yourself you got it from the Virgin Mary? Leonard spoke up, his voice firm. Dr. Webb, I checked with everyone on that roof. Nobody else was diabetic. Nobody had insulin. With all due respect, Mr. Thibodeau, people's memories after trauma aren't reliable. Perhaps someone did have it and simply doesn't remember now. Father Como interjected quietly. Doctor, I personally interviewed everyone who was there. I have written statements. Nobody had insulin. Dr. Webb was growing frustrated. Then perhaps Emma found it somewhere in the church. Perhaps it was in a first aid kit or... We checked, Father Como continued. The church had no first aid supplies. We'd cleaned out all the cabinets months before because of a minor flooding issue. There was nothing in that building except furniture and religious items. Then it was dropped by rescue workers. The rescue helicopters didn't arrive until the next morning, Dr. Rousseau said. I've reviewed the rescue logs. No supplies were delivered to that location until after Leonard had already received the injection. Dr. Webb felt the argument slipping away from him. Doctor, surely you're not suggesting this was actually a miracle? Dr. Rousseau met his eyes. I'm suggesting that I can't explain it medically. And I've tried. Over the next 3 days, Dr. Webb threw himself into the investigation with increasing desperation. He needed to find the rational explanation. His reputation depended on it. He interviewed all 12 witnesses from the church roof. Their stories were remarkably consistent. Emma descending into the flooded church, the blue light appearing, Emma's voice talking to someone, Emma emerging completely dry with the insulin vial. You all saw her dry? He pressed them. Bone dry, confirmed Mrs. Delacroix. I touched her shirt myself, perfectly dry, like she'd never been in water. That's impossible. She was underwater. She had to be wet. Mrs. Delacroix just shrugged. I know what I saw, Doctor. I know what I touched. Dr. Webb visited the Walgreens pharmacy on Government Street, which had just reopened. He spoke with the pharmacist, reviewed the records, confirmed that no insulin could have been dispensed during the flood days. He examined the vial itself, which Dr. Rousseau had preserved as evidence. It was authentic Humalog insulin, properly stored, with Leonard's information on the label. The lot number matched a batch that had been delivered to that Walgreens location 3 weeks before the flood. But the pharmacy had been underwater. All their medications had been destroyed. The insurance company had already processed the claim for the loss. So where had this vial come from? Dr. Webb's most intensive investigation was at the Church of Our Lady of Lourdes itself. He brought in a structural engineer to examine the statue's pedestal. Is there any way this could have remained dry during the flood? The engineer studied it carefully, took measurements, reviewed photos showing the waterline on the walls. No way. The water was at least a foot above the statue. It should be damaged. The marble should be stained. The paint should be ruined. But look at it, it's pristine, like it was just installed yesterday. Dr. Webb had a botanist examine the roses. The expert identified them as Rosa alba, a variety that bloomed in early summer, not August. Moreover, every garden and plant in the neighborhood had been killed by the floodwaters' combination of sewage, chemicals, and salt from the disrupted water systems. These roses couldn't have survived the flood, the botanist confirmed, and they couldn't have bloomed in mid-August. They're completely out of season. Could someone have brought them here, placed them as a hoax? The petals are weeks old. They've been here since the flood, and there are hundreds of them that would require bringing in dozens of rose bushes. Where would someone get them? Every florist in the city was closed. Dr. Webb stood in the church surrounded by the evidence and felt his certainty crumbling. That evening, he returned to his hotel and reviewed all his notes, looking for something, anything, he'd missed. His phone rang. It was his wife calling from New Orleans. "Marcus, have you seen the news? You need to come home." "What's wrong?" "It's your mother. She collapsed this morning. They think it's a stroke. She's in the ICU at Oxnard." Dr. Webb felt the world tilt. His mother was 78, his last living parent, the woman who'd raised him alone after his father died. "I'm coming. I'll be there in 2 hours." He threw his belongings into his suitcase, his mind racing. A stroke. His mother. Why did this have to happen now, in the middle of this investigation? As he was checking out of the hotel, he ran into Jennifer Marchand, the reporter. "Dr. Webb, I heard about your mother. I'm so sorry. How did news travel so fast in this city?" "Thank you. I need to go." "Of course, but before you do, there's someone who wants to speak with you." Emma Thibodeau stepped out from behind a pillar in the hotel lobby, holding her grandfather's hand. Dr. Webb stopped. "Emma, what are you doing here?" "I heard about your mama," Emma said softly. "I'm sorry she's sick." "Thank you, but I really need to. She told me to give you something," Emma continued. Dr. Webb froze. "She? Who's she?" "The Blessed Mother. She said you'd need this." Emma held out her hand. In her palm was a small medal, a miraculous medal, the kind Catholic children wore around their necks. It showed the Virgin Mary with rays of light streaming from her hands. "She said to tell you that your mama will be okay, that the stroke will be minor, that she'll recover fully. And she said..." Emma paused, her young face serious. "She said you know the truth now. You've seen the evidence, and she's asking you to be honest about what you found." Dr. Webb stared at the medal. He felt something crack open inside his chest. Years of certainty, of intellectual armor, of defensive skepticism. "How did you know about my mother?" he whispered. "I didn't, but she did." Leonard placed a hand on his granddaughter's shoulder. "Dr. Webb, we're praying for your mother, and we're praying for you too." Dr. Webb took the medal with shaking hands. He wanted to say it was a coincidence that Emma had heard about his mother through the grapevine, that this was just another psychological manipulation. But he couldn't. Because standing there in that hotel lobby, he suddenly knew, with a certainty that bypassed all his education and training and skepticism, that Emma was telling the truth. She had met the Virgin Mary in that flooded church. The miracle was real. He drove to New Orleans in a daze, gripping the steering wheel with one hand and the miraculous medal with the other. At Oxnard Medical Center, he found his mother in the ICU, unconscious but stable. The neurologist met him in the hallway. "Dr. Webb, I have good news. The stroke was minor. Very minor, actually. We caught it early. The brain scan shows minimal damage. With physical therapy, we expect her to make a full recovery." Dr. Webb closed his eyes. "A full recovery?" "Yes, honestly, we're surprised. When she came in, we feared it was much more serious, but the scans don't show the kind of damage we were expecting. She's extremely lucky." Or blessed, Dr. Webb thought. He sat beside his mother's bed all night, holding her hand, the miraculous medal clutched in his other palm. When she woke the next morning, weak but alert, she smiled at him. "Marcus, you came." "Of course, Mom." "I had the strangest dream," she murmured.
"I dreamed there was a woman in blue standing beside my bed. She told me I'd be fine. She told me my son was about to discover something important." Dr. Webb felt tears streaming down his face. "Mom, I think I have." 3 days later, Dr. Marcus Webb returned to Baton Rouge. He found Father Comeau at the Church of Our Lady of Lourdes,
supervising volunteers who were helping clean and repair the building. "Father, I need to talk to you." They sat on the front steps of the church, and Dr. Webb told him everything. His investigation, his conclusions, his mother's stroke, Emma's visit to the hotel, the recovery. "I came here to debunk this," Dr. Webb said quietly. "I was so sure I'd find a rational explanation. But Father, I can't. The evidence doesn't support a natural explanation. The witnesses are credible. The medical records are clear. The physical evidence, the statue, the roses, the insulin, none of it makes sense unless it was a miracle," Father Comeau finished gently. "I'm a scientist. I've spent my whole career explaining away miracles, but this..." Dr. Webb shook his head. "This is real, and I don't know what to do with that." Father Comeau put a hand on his shoulder. "Perhaps you write the truth. Perhaps you tell people what you found. Not what you wanted to find, but what actually happened. My colleagues will crucify me. Perhaps. Or perhaps you'll give them what you've always wanted to give people. The truth." That evening, Dr. Marcus Webb appeared on WBRZ News with Jennifer Marchand. "Dr. Webb, you came to Baton Rouge to investigate the alleged miracle at Our Lady of Lourdes Church. What did you find?" Dr. Webb took a deep breath. "I found something I didn't expect. I came here looking for a hoax, for mass hysteria, for some rational explanation. But after 3 days of intensive investigation, interviewing witnesses, examining physical evidence, consulting with medical experts and engineers and botanists, I cannot provide a natural explanation for what happened." Jennifer leaned forward. "Are you saying you believe it was a miracle?" "I'm saying that the evidence supports the witness's account. Emma Thibodeau's story is consistent, credible, and corroborated by multiple reliable witnesses. The physical evidence, the insulin vial, the untouched statue, the roses, defies natural explanation. And..." He paused. "And I've experienced something personal that has convinced me that whatever happened in that church was genuine." "So you believe Emma met the Virgin Mary?" Dr. Webb looked directly into the camera. "I believe that in a flooded church in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, during one of the worst natural disasters in state history, a young girl received help from a source I cannot scientifically explain, but can no longer rationally deny. Whether you call that the Virgin Mary, a miracle, or divine intervention. I'll leave that to your own faith and understanding, but something extraordinary happened. Something real." The interview went viral. Within days, it had been viewed millions of times. The story of the miracle at Our Lady of Lourdes spread across the country, across the world. And with it came something else: pilgrims. By September 15, 2016, the Church of Our Lady of Lourdes had become a pilgrimage site. They came from everywhere, from Shreveport and Lake Charles, from Mississippi and Texas, from Tennessee and Arkansas, then from farther away, California, New York, Illinois, Florida, and then from other countries, Mexico, Canada, the Philippines, Poland, Brazil. They came in cars and buses, on crutches and in wheelchairs, carrying sick children and elderly parents, bringing their broken bodies and broken hearts to a ruined church in a devastated neighborhood, seeking the same mercy that had been shown to Emma Thibodeau and her grandfather. Father Comeau tried to manage it as best he could. The church building itself was still being repaired. The walls had been cleaned, the floors replaced, new pews ordered. But the statue of Our Lady of Lourdes remained untouched, exactly as it had been found after the flood. The archdiocese had decided to leave it that way, a testament to what had happened. The roses, dried and preserved, were kept in glass cases on either side of the statue. Pilgrims would kneel before them, praying, weeping, reaching out to touch the glass as if the flowers themselves carried some residual grace. Father Como stood in the sanctuary each day, watching the endless stream of suffering humanity pass through, and felt utterly humbled. He'd been a priest for 40 years, but he'd never witnessed faith like this. Raw, desperate, beautiful faith that believed in miracles, even when everything else had been swept away by the flood. Emma and Leonard had moved into a FEMA trailer temporarily while their house was being rebuilt. Emma had returned to school, trying to resume some kind of normal life, but normal had become impossible. People recognized her everywhere. At the grocery store, at church, on the street. They'd stop her, ask her to pray for them, beg her to ask the Blessed Mother for help with their problems. Emma, a woman, approached her outside school one afternoon. "My daughter has leukemia. Could you ask Our Lady to heal her?" Emma felt the weight of it crushing down on her 11-year-old shoulders. I'm not special. I can't make miracles happen. But you saw her. You talked to her. Please, just pray for my daughter. Please. What could Emma say? How could she refuse? So she prayed right there on the sidewalk, holding the woman's hands, asking the Blessed Mother to help this child she'd never met, and she did this dozens of times a day. Leonard watched his granddaughter struggling under the burden of what had happened, and his heart ached. "Baby girl, you don't have to do this. You don't owe anyone anything. But Grandpa, they're hurting. How can I not pray for them? You're just a child. This is too much." Emma looked up at him with those eyes that had seen the Virgin Mary. "She told me I would help people, that this was part of why it happened. I can't stop now." Dr. Patricia Rousseau continued to follow Leonard's case, fascinated from both a medical and personal perspective. His recovery had been complete, better than complete actually. His diabetes, which had been progressively worsening over the past decade, seemed to have stabilized. His insulin requirements had decreased. His kidney function had improved. "It doesn't make sense," she told her colleagues at a staff meeting. Diabetic patients who go through severe ketoacidosis typically show long-term complications, but Leonard is healthier now than he was before the flood. "Patricia," one of the senior physicians said gently, "maybe you need to accept that you witnessed something medical science can't explain." "I'm trying," she admitted. "I really am." She visited the Church of Our Lady of Lourdes one evening after her shift, joining the pilgrims kneeling before the statue. She prayed, really prayed, for the first time in years, thanking God for the sign she'd asked for the restoration of her faith, for the privilege of witnessing something miraculous. And she wasn't alone. Dr. Marcus Webb had returned to New Orleans a changed man. He'd resigned from his position at Tulane University, not in disgrace, but by choice. He could no longer in good conscience teach that miracles didn't exist when he'd witnessed one himself. He was writing a new book, one that would undoubtedly destroy his credibility in skeptical circles, but that he felt compelled to write anyway. The Miracle at Baton Rouge, A Skeptic's Journey to Faith. His mother had made a full recovery from her stroke, just as Emma had promised. She now wore the miraculous medal around her neck and attended daily Mass at St. Louis Cathedral in New Orleans. "I'm proud of you," she told Marcus one Sunday after Mass, "for having the courage to tell the truth even when it cost you everything." "It didn't cost me everything, Mom. It gave me something I didn't know I was missing." "What's that?" "Hope." Back in Baton Rouge, the official church investigation had begun. Archbishop Robert Munch had appointed a canonical commission to examine the events at Our Lady of Lourdes, a standard procedure for alleged miracles. The commission included theologians, medical experts, psychologists, and historians, all tasked with determining whether what happened met the Church's rigorous criteria for supernatural intervention. They interviewed Emma multiple times. She answered their questions patiently, telling the same story she'd told everyone else, never embellishing, never changing details. They examined Leonard's medical records, consulted with Dr. Rousseau, reviewed the lab results on the insulin vial. They interviewed all 12 witnesses from the church roof, checking their accounts for consistency. They studied the statue, the roses, the physical evidence. They analyzed Emma's psychological profile, looking for signs of delusion, fantasy-prone personality, or trauma-induced hallucination. Months passed. Christmas came. The church, now repaired, held midnight mass, and over 2,000 people attended, far more than the small building could hold. They spilled out onto the lawn, into the street, standing in the cold December night to celebrate the birth of Christ in a place where his mother had appeared. Emma was there with Leonard, sitting in the front pew. Father Comeau looked at her during his homily, this young girl who'd been thrust into something so much larger than herself, and felt his heart swell with love and admiration. "We celebrate tonight the mystery of the Incarnation," he preached. "God becoming flesh, entering into our suffering, dwelling with us in the darkness, and we celebrate because this same God did not abandon us during the flood. He sent his mother to comfort a frightened child and to show us all that even in the deepest waters we are not alone." The congregation wept because they remembered the flood, they remembered the fear, they remembered losing their homes, their possessions, their sense of security, but they also remembered that in the midst of disaster, mercy had appeared. New Year's came, and with it, pilgrims continued to arrive. The stories of healings began to circulate, never proven, never documented with the rigor required for official church recognition, but whispered among the faithful nonetheless. A woman from Texas claimed her migraines had stopped after praying before the statue. A man from Florida said his depression had lifted. A child from Mississippi, severely autistic and nonverbal, spoke his first words after his mother brought him to Our Lady of Lourdes. Were they miracles? Coincidences? The power of faith activating the body's natural healing mechanisms? No one could say for certain. But the story spread, and more pilgrims came. Emma turned 12 in February 2017. She celebrated quietly with Leonard, Father Comeau, and a few close friends. She was growing up, her face losing its childhood roundness, her voice becoming more mature. But her eyes, those eyes that had seen the Virgin Mary, remained steady and calm. "Do you ever doubt it happened?" Leonard asked her one evening as they sat on the steps of their rebuilt house. "Do you ever wonder if maybe it was a dream?" Emma shook her head. "No, Grandpa. I know what I saw. I know who I met. And I know what she promised me, that you'd live to see me grow up. And here you are." Leonard pulled her close. "Here I am, thanks to you, baby girl. Not thanks to me, thanks to her." In March 2017, 6 months after the investigation began, the Canonical Commission submitted its report to Archbishop Muench. Their conclusion: while they could not definitively prove supernatural intervention, they found no natural explanation for the events at Our Lady of Lourdes Church. Emma Thibodeau's testimony was deemed credible. The witnesses were reliable. The medical evidence was inexplicable. The physical evidence defied natural explanation. The commission recommended that the case be forwarded to the Congregation for the Causes of Saints in Rome for further examination. Archbishop Muench held a press conference on the steps of the cathedral in downtown Baton Rouge. After careful investigation and prayerful discernment, he announced, "I am convinced that something extraordinary occurred at Our Lady of Lourdes Church during the flood of August 2016. While the church will continue to investigate, and while final determination rests with the Holy See, I am authorizing Our Lady of Lourdes as an official pilgrimage site within our archdiocese. What happened there deserves our veneration and our gratitude." The news spread around the world. CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, international media descended on Baton Rouge to cover the story. Emma's face appeared on magazine covers. Documentary filmmakers requested interviews. But through it all, Emma remained remarkably grounded. She gave interviews when the church asked her to, but she never sought the spotlight. She attended school, did her homework, played violin in the school orchestra, had sleepovers with friends. "Aren't you worried about her?" Father Comeau asked Leonard one day. "All this attention? All this pressure?" Leonard smiled. "I used to be, but then I realized something. She's not carrying this burden alone. The same one who appeared to her in that church is watching over her now, My job is just to love her and keep her grounded. The rest is in God's hands." 2 years passed. Emma entered high school. She was a good student, not exceptional but solid. She joined the track team. She still played violin. She had a small circle of close friends who knew about her experience but treated her normally. The pilgrims kept coming to Our Lady of Lourdes, though in smaller numbers now. The initial frenzy had settled into a steady stream of faithful visitors seeking prayer and peace. Father Como had aged visibly, the weight of managing the pilgrimage site taking its toll, but he never complained. He considered it the greatest privilege of his priesthood. Dr. Patricia Rousseau had been promoted to Chief of Emergency Medicine at Our Lady of the Lake. She kept a photo on her desk, Emma and Leonard standing beside the statue of Our Lady of Lourdes, as a reminder that medicine had its limits and that mystery still existed in the world. Dr. Marcus Webb's book had been published to mixed reviews. His former colleagues in the skeptical community dismissed it as the desperate rationalization of a man who'd lost his objectivity. But among believers, it became a bestseller, translated into multiple languages, giving hope to countless people who'd experienced something they couldn't explain. Leonard's health remained stable, better than stable, remarkably good for a man his age with his medical history. He and Emma still lived in their rebuilt house on Bluebonnet Boulevard. He still sat on the front porch in the evenings, watching her practice violin, thanking God for every extra day he'd been given. And Emma? She continued to pray for people who asked. She visited the church regularly, kneeling before the statue, having private conversations with the Blessed Mother that she shared with no one. In August 2019, 3 years after the flood, the Vatican announced its decision. The Congregation for the Causes of Saints had completed its investigation. After reviewing all the evidence, consulting with medical experts, theologians, and historical scholars, they had reached a conclusion. The events at Our Lady of Lourdes Church in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, bore the marks of authentic supernatural intervention. While stopping short of declaring it an official apparition, that designation was reserved for appearances where the Virgin Mary delivered messages for the Universal Church. They acknowledged it as a private revelation worthy of belief. Pope Francis himself issued a statement. In a time of disaster and despair, Our Lady showed her maternal care for a suffering child and her ailing grandfather. This reminds us that God's mercy reaches into the darkest waters of our lives, bringing light, hope, and healing. Let the story of Emma Thibodeau inspire us all to trust in divine providence, especially in our moments of greatest need. The news was broadcast around the world. In Baton Rouge, bells rang at every Catholic church in the city. Our Lady of Lourdes held a special Mass of Thanksgiving, packed with thousands of people, locals who'd lived through the flood, pilgrims who'd traveled from around the world, and church officials including Archbishop Muench and several visiting bishops. Emma sat in the front pew with Leonard, overwhelmed by the attention, by the enormity of what had happened. Father Como preached the homily, his voice thick with emotion. 3 years ago, this city experienced one of the worst natural disasters in its history. We lost homes. We lost possessions. Some of us lost loved ones. We wondered where God was in the midst of such suffering. He gestured toward Emma, and God answered, not with explanations, not with philosophical arguments about the problem of evil, but with a mother's love. Our Lady came to a terrified child in a flooded church and said, "I am with you. Even in the deepest waters, I am with you." And that message, that promise, is for all of us. After Mass, Emma was mobbed by well-wishers. People wanted to touch her, to take photos with her, to ask her to pray for them. Leonard tried to protect her, but there were too many people. And then Emma did something that no one expected. She climbed onto the church steps and raised her hands for silence. The crowd quieted, hundreds of people waiting to hear what she would say. Emma was 14 now, no longer the frightened 11-year-old who dove into a flooded church, but her voice still carried that same calm certainty it had always had. "I know you all came here looking for miracles," she said, her voice carrying in the evening air. "And I want you to know something. The miracle isn't just what happened to me and my grandpa. The miracle is that God loves you. every single one of you. The miracle is that in your darkest moments, when you feel like you're drowning, when you feel alone and scared and desperate, you're not alone. She's there. The Blessed Mother is there. God is there. Tears streamed down her face. You don't need to meet her like I did to experience her love. You just need to ask. You just need to reach out. And I promise you, her voice broke. I promise you, she will answer, maybe not the way you expect, maybe not in the way you want, but she will answer, because she loves you more than you can possibly imagine. The crowd was silent, many people openly weeping. So don't come here looking for me, Emma continued. Don't put your faith in me. I'm just a girl who was scared and asked for help. Come here and talk to her. She's the one with the power. She's the one who saves. She's the one who loves. Emma stepped down from the steps and walked into the church, needing a moment alone. She went to the statue of Our Lady of Lourdes, the statue that had remained untouched by the floodwaters, and knelt before it. Thank you, she whispered, for everything, for my grandpa, for showing me you're real, for giving me this chance to help people understand how much you love them. And in the quiet of the church, with the evening light streaming through the stained glass windows, new windows, replacing those damaged by the flood, Emma felt that familiar presence, not a vision, not a voice, just a deep, overwhelming sense of love and peace. She was not alone. She had never been alone, and she never would be. Outside, Leonard stood with Father Como watching pilgrims line up to enter the church. She's quite a young woman, Father Como said. She is, Leonard agreed, his voice thick with pride. And I get to see her grow up, just like the Blessed Mother promised. It's a miracle. Yes, Leonard said simply. Yes, it is. Years would pass. Emma would graduate high school, go to college, study music therapy. She would use her gifts to help others, working with children in hospitals, bringing comfort and beauty into places of suffering. She would marry eventually, a good man who loved her and understood the weight of what she'd experienced. Leonard would indeed walk her down the aisle, tears streaming down his face, grateful for every extra year he'd been given. And when Emma's first child was born, a daughter, they would name her Mary, in honor of the woman in blue who had saved them in the flooded church. The Church of Our Lady of Lourdes would remain a pilgrimage site for generations. People would continue to come, seeking the same mercy that had been shown to Emma and Leonard. Some would receive dramatic healings. Others would find peace. All would encounter the same truth that Emma had discovered in the darkest waters. God's love reaches into every flood, every disaster, every moment of fear and desperation. And through his mother's tender intercession, he whispers the same promise to every suffering heart. I am with you, even in the deepest waters, always. The miracle at Baton Rouge stands as a testament to the power of faith, the reality of divine mercy, and the truth that in our darkest moments, we are never alone. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to know that miracles still happen. Subscribe to receive daily stories of Our Lady's miracles and let her maternal love bring light into your life. Because the same mother who appeared to Emma in that flooded church is waiting to hear your prayers too. All you have to do is ask.